Masculine Mindset Show. It's Adam Skoda back on with Hannah Spanke today. How you doing, Hannah?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to have another conversation.
Awesome. We're gonna talk vulnerability today. Now, I'm gonna actually start out by playing this game called Two Truths and a Lie. Do you know what this is? Two Truths and a Lie.
Okay.
So what this this leverages vulnerability, and I want to start out with this because this actually does. It's like a fun, playful way to kind of basically talk about vulnerable truths and lies that we all have. So that's it. And I'm going to go first. So I have a dark side that refuses to be tamed. Okay. Second one is, let's see here. I went through a breakup earlier this year. Third one is, I'm into midgets with hairy legs.
Okay. And you want me to guess them or
Yep.
just say my three?
Just guess which one is a truth. Guess which one is a lie.
Okay, I'm gonna guess that the midget fetish is a lie.
Yep. And which one is true now?
Are the other two not both true?
You
Are
get
they both true?
they're both true. They're both true. All right.
Okay.
So now it's Tina's turn.
Okay. Let's see. I moved across the country by myself this year. I am a real estate agent and I am afraid of the dark.
I think the real estate agent is the lie.
Uh-huh.
The other two are true.
Yes.
Awesome. Now, remind me, where did you move? Oh, okay. So you said Nevada, but weren't you in California though? Right?
I just moved here from Joshua Tree, but I moved back to California after moving to Virginia, Kentucky, and then back to California all in the last year.
So how was it there? Was it beautiful or what?
In Joshua Tree,
Yeah.
amazing. It's such a vortex. It's so amazing.
Awesome. I definitely want to check that out there. All right. So the next part is we're going to talk about vulnerability today. Now, first thing I want to mention here is that I have a lot of things to say about this. First off, have you read my article?
Hmm. I read that this
Now,
morning.
what are your thoughts on vulnerability, and what can you tell my listeners about vulnerability?
You mean in the context of men and women, like romantically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just generally, like overview is, I would say that vulnerability is a requirement for a romantic connection, for anything to be sustainable, to last. If you're shooting for more than a one night stand, you have to be vulnerable about something.
Hmm.
And so I think it's a requirement, but it also needs to be done well, because it's something that can either kind of like sink or swim, make or break the connection if it's done with care, or if it's done kind of recklessly or just unwell, it can create holes in the connection.
Yep. Yeah. So, in my mind, true vulnerability, is living with an open heart, hands down.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, I read the book Way of the Superior Man, and this book, in my mind, has to be read, in my opinion, from both men and women because it's just such a valuable book. And what it says in
Mm-hmm.
that book is that a man has to be in free thought of feeling and action. And what that means is like you open yourself up slowly. Does that make sense? So how I see vulnerability is you don't want to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
That is a mistake I made, and I'll get to that later in the podcast. But um, so yeah, if there's anything else that you want to say on that, let me know.
Yeah, I like that. What you just described, I agree with that completely. Like any moment where you are contracting, you're closing yourself off to some experience just because it might not feel great, is the opposite of vulnerability. That's like trying to self protect. And that cuts you off from what might not feel good, but it also cuts you off from everything that you want to.
Yep.
So I like that frame.
Yep. Okay, so one thing I want to mention before we actually dive deeper into vulnerability, that is, I want to let all my listeners know right now that you have to really calibrate this, because how I see it is when you're first starting out in a relationship, you can't just be vulnerable right away. And in fact, in my book, Closer's Guide to Seduction, I state very clearly, too much vulnerability too soon is off-putting. And I was very like a smartass about it in that article that I sent you. But
Hmm.
it's true though, like guys nowadays, they're too available, they compliment way too much, and not to mention they just put women up on this massive pedestal. And I think, okay, let's slow down, because to women, I mean, I think that you can attest to this, that that's too much. You know what I mean? And so in my opinion, I think that the common mistake with vulnerability now that I want to get to is too much vulnerability too soon is overwhelming to women.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. And this just brought up a really, really great point that I do not think is talked about enough. It just spurred this thought. So when you started what you just said, and you said like when you're just getting started, it
Mm-hmm.
made me remember, because like when you've been doing this work for long enough, it's easy to kind of forget when how it was before you started trying to be vulnerable, you know? And it's a good reminder that this isn't something we're really taught when we are raised, especially men. You know, you're not taught how to vulnerably connect on purpose. And so as an adult, you just have to learn that the hard way. And then eventually you do start trying to practice it. And I think where a lot of men go wrong, women too, is you like dip one toe, you're on the first step, second step, and then it's like, okay, you're willing to be vulnerable. And so the first person you turn to is that romantic partner because of the nature of that connection. And then I think that creates a lot of like instability in the relationship when that's the only outlet for him. That's when it can feel really overwhelming for the woman, speaking like from my own experience, is when a man is working on his vulnerability and me as his partner, I'm the only person he's willing to do it with. So it's like you need, as a man, I would say you need to have support outside of the relationship where you can also be practicing vulnerable connection and vulnerability so that you can handle expressing yourself with your woman in a way that doesn't have an attachment or expectation that she's going to be like your one and only safe space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I say, you guys, if you're listening, keep your options open, because too much vulnerability not only overwhelms women, but you want to always like, all right, so here's how I see it. You want to have like a lineup. All right. Now, I know you hear that, Hannah, you're like thinking, Adam, you're encouraging options. Yes, I do, because I think that men have got to be dating like multiple women before they settle down. And so that's why I say that. But the whole purpose behind that, of me saying that, is I just want men to remember that when you have that plate spinning mindset, as I say on my article, why there is no one-itis, what plate spinning means is it just means you're seeing multiple women. So I just want to encourage every single guy listening to not leave your eggs in one basket. One-itis is very real. Don't confuse one-itis with love, because one-itis is not love. That's you being codependent. So if there's anything you want to say on that, let me know.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I do agree that I think it's important for men and women both to date, you know, to get to know different people and give yourself that time and space to investigate a person before you just commit and like go balls deep and then you're in a codependent relationship that breaks up in a year, you know.
Yep.
So I think that dating process is so, so important and we need more encouragement around that to really take it seriously. But I want to go one step further with like the diversification here. I think it's important for men to not be putting all their eggs in one basket right away with one romantic partner woman. Spread that out a little bit so you can actually see what it is that you value, what it is that you like, what you don't like, and get really clear on and have strong boundaries around navigating that process without just, you know, oh, this one thing feels good, so I'm going to sacrifice all this other stuff that's important to me and then sticking on. But I think it's also important for them to have outlets that are not romantic women, like maybe a therapist or a men's group or a female friend or a male friend or a parent or somebody where you can practice vulnerability and like bounce things off of in other contexts, other types of containers, because vulnerability in a relationship is a requirement, but it's also just a skill set for life. And so if you can only connect in your romantic relationships, then that eventually becomes another wall that you have to get through if you aren't also aware that like you need to practice this in the rest of your life too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. All right, so let's go down here. Okay. Right. I have notes on this. Okay, so we're gonna talk about here. All right, I have some stories to tell from my book, but first and foremost, I want to hear some stories that you have. Obviously, I've listened to your podcast, and I know that you have a ton of stories to tell my listeners on what you've been through. So feel free to tell my listeners anything that you've been through in your life that is like you think is a vulnerable story. You don't have to go too deep into it, but I'm just encouraging you to tell a vulnerable story now.
Okay. Do you mean for me to tell a vulnerable story like about myself, like as an example of
Yes,
telling something vulnerable, or
exactly.
a story? Okay, because I also have, maybe we'll circle back to this. I also have stories of like my experience of men being vulnerable or not vulnerable that might be helpful to share from a woman's perspective. Okay, so let's see. Where do I want to start? Okay, so I'll start with being sober. So I am sober. I stopped drinking a little over 3 years ago, and that's not the most popular lifestyle, especially in your 20s, 30s. You're dating. Everybody wants to go out for drinks. You have drink with dinner. Like it's just such a normal part of our relating. It's part of our society. It's part of our culture. And so to opt out of that, and I want to kind of just for the sake of the listener apply what I'm saying to anything that feels personally important to you that isn't like the norm. Maybe you're really into this type of anime or something and it's kind of like offbeat. Maybe you're really into health and fitness and you don't stay up past 10 p.m. for that reason. Like whatever it is that makes you unique and it's something you're really important, that's something that's really important to you, it can be vulnerable to express that part of yourself because you don't know that it's going to be socially accepted by the person you're trying to connect with. And so for me, being sober and dating, like it took a long time for me to actually fully own that and claim that and be like, I don't drink, I'm sober, period. Do you want to go get coffee? Do you want to go to lunch? Like, I don't want to go to the wine bar at 7 p.m., and just like really upholding that truth. And so I think that when you think of vulnerability, it's easy to think about just like messy, crying, horrible, like dirty parts of yourself that you have to expose. But I think it can also be like practiced through things that are just really important to you. So for me, sharing what's important to me feels like a vulnerability with a new connection because I'm hoping they're going to accept it. I'm hoping they're going to support me in valuing that without any assurance that they will. So really just letting somebody know you, the good and the bad, is vulnerable. And that's been my experience.
You know, I actually want to comment on that because, okay, I don't want to say who got into a car accident because I actually did have a podcast on this. It was with the Chisler James, who I met through Wes Watson. But
Mhm.
what what I said in that episode, I think it was How to Man Up, is I said that there was a terrible tragedy that hit close to home, and I'll just say that a close family member just was drunk driving, and long story short, this really lit a fire in my ass to get my book published. Closers get
Mm,
production. Yeah, I just realized that like sometimes some really tragic events can kind of motivate you, but I want to be careful with that because you don't want to like act like it's a good thing because it's not a good thing. But it's just really you treat it as, oh, this really makes you better. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
so that family member now is now in AA, which is awesome. And by the way, congratulations, Hannah. That's awesome. I love that.
thank you.
Um, I have not took any sip of alcohol for a very long time. I had wine in Australia when I went to see my sister, and that was honestly I felt loopy just from tasting wine. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how much I don't drink. But
Mm-hmm.
either way, so yeah, basically, long story short, I got my book published from that crazy incident, and so now that leads to my vulnerable story, which is I was telling Hannah before the podcast that basically I think that when I was at a haunted building, and by the way, guys, if you listen to my podcast Halloween special, I play this EVP in real time. Which, by the way, Hannah, I can share it. I can share it with you after the podcast. But it's a creepy EVP. But either way, what I think, okay, guys, I know some of you are skeptical.
Wait, wait, what does EVP mean?
Electronic voice phenomena,
Got it. Okay.
ghost voice,
Got
and
it.
so ever since I heard that EVP, it was with a coworker of mine. I'm not bullshitting you. And look, I don't know what led to the arguments between me and Emily, but I will tell you the truth, Hannah. Um, when I went to the next account that I had to clean because this building was very old, and we caught like these crazy EVPs with my coworker. Because me being crazy, I like that dark shit. Let's
Mm-hmm.
let's not make up any illusions. I like that dark shit. But I went
Mm-hmm.
to that next building, and I didn't touch my fucking phone. Like, I didn't fucking touch it. And what happened was I put up my phone, and then there was a picture of me and Emily, like just right there. Like, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And then I was like, okay. And then shortly after, like in a few weeks after that, now I don't know what led up to this, but Emily and I started arguing more and more, and then it just led to like conflict, makeup sex, conflict, makeup sex, and then it slowly led to, ironically enough, when I reached out to Hannah, I think, when I connected with her last February. I'm not kidding you, Hannah. This is so weird, but when you were going through that breakup, that was like 1 week after our interview. I broke up with Emily.
Mm.
That was too coincidental, but yeah, that was kind of like the vulnerable share that I was gonna get off my chest, and that was just so ironic how that happened. But yeah, we went through a breakup, but then we got back together. Which, by the way, I'm going to say that for my hardcover book. So there is a story behind that. Now, if there's another vulnerable story that you want to share, let me know because I think that one was just interesting to me because I can't even believe how much conflict and tension there was after like that incident happened with my phone. But it was just weird.
Mm-hmm. So what does it mean to you? Like, what did you make meaning out of it with the phone thing?
I think that there was some type of energy between me and Emily. Like we it was more fiery passion, to be real with you. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
like in a way it intensified, and we would
Mm.
banter on the phone, and then after that when we would meet up, it just got very physical, and then it just felt like okay, there was a disconnect there because I I felt a little off. Just but yeah, there's more to it than that. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. So if there's any more vulnerable shares that you want to tell my listeners, let me know.
Well, what I can share is I think maybe we talked about this briefly on our last call. I don't remember um, the whole content of what we talked about last episode, but for anyone that doesn't know or hasn't seen my social medias, my history, I've been in the work that I do now for almost 5 years. But before that, I was in the sex industry for almost 8 years, adult entertainment industry in all different forms. And I am not an advocate of it whatsoever at this point, just for clarity. But coming from that world and then shifting out of it and doing all the healing I've done to, repair the parts of me that were impacted and then using that wisdom to help others now, it's something that is such a positive force in my life. Like I'm able to see it as something that like, yeah, it was all meant to be. I needed to experience what I experienced for all of this that I do now. Like it all makes sense. But I notice every time I'm connecting with a new man, I get this little tiny fear that comes up of like a fear of judgment, a fear of rejection, a fear of abandonment. like, fuck, I'm going to have to tell them about this thing. I have to tell them about this part of my past. And I don't know how it's going to go. Like, I don't know how they're going to take it,
So
even though it's not even a part of my life now. And so I still noticed that. Like, I just ended something that was about 6 weeks long with a guy a couple weeks ago. So maybe two months ago or so, I was in the beginning of a new connection, and I felt that come up even now. So I guess the takeaway I want to leave listeners with that share is like, don't be surprised. Like, give yourself the space to still have shit come up around past stuff that you think you're, quote unquote, past or moved on from, because those are often like hidden, shadowy points of vulnerability that might come up and scare the shit out of you when it does come up in a conversation, because you're thinking it's no big deal, but there's still emotion tied to it. And so, yeah, I would invite everybody in connection to explore sharing some parts of your past that you might not feel stoked about, and seeing what's still there for you or not, and letting yourself be seen in that way.
I want to elaborate on that. Hannah, you reminded me. I don't share this enough on my show. I just don't, because it does make me uncomfortable. But I'm willing to go there because let's face it, all my listeners know that vulnerability is my favorite topic. I'm just kidding. It's a joke. Um, Years ago, it was like 15 years ago. This this incident comes up where I actually got sick, like physically sick. I I threw up, and then after that I got mentally sick. It went to my head, and then I basically had to go to the hospital, and some nurses held me down to basically do some blood work, which was traumatic for me. And
Hmm.
what the reason I bring that up is because that was before um, I got into fitness, and then after I was in the hospital and I got out of the hospital, I realized that fitness was the only outlet for me to get out of my head, and that's why I'm where I'm at today. So
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would love to just kind of like reflect back to you, like, for the sake of the all the teachable moments possible for
yeah,
the listeners, like me being a woman, hearing you say that, being on the receiving end of that, just, kind of role play in my mind as if this was like an intimacy building conversation for us. That felt so good for me to hear, because it's me being let in a little bit, me learning something about you that isn't obvious, and you sharing something about like something that was difficult for you, and how
mhm,
it benefited you, how it challenged you, how you overcame it, what it turned into, how you took that pain and turned it into more purpose. And like all of that, to me as the woman, tells me, shows me that you as the man can be comfortable with your emotional experience and not make anyone else responsible for it, because that's where the vulnerability goes left, like takes a left turn, goes south is the term, I guess. Goes south. um in romantic connection is like, it's going well, it's going well, it's going well, and then the moment that the energy of what you're saying is, it's like too unresolved, or it's too unprocessed, or you don't know what to do with all this emotion, it feels like it's being thrown up all over the woman. Like there's no safety between your emotions and her hearing about them. That is what creates the overwhelm, and it's a lack of safety, lack of trust right away. And then the man is hurt and he's confused because he's like, but I thought she wanted me to be vulnerable and now I'm being rejected, what the fuck. So
right.
it's like sharing yourself openly with the total responsibility that it's your experience you're sharing, and you're not looking for any sort of like coddling necessarily by sharing it.
Yeah, yeah. When I think about it now, I'm like, wow, that's such a past life of mine. But it was very real for me when it happened, you guys. My family went through hell with me going through that hospital experience, and it was, I was misdiagnosed. The doctors didn't give me the right diagnosis at all, and basically, long story short, I got 10 times better, and yeah, I'm at where I am today. I personal trainer, trained 100 people. So, but
And
yeah,
how long ago was that?
I want to say 15 years old. I'm 31 now, so that's like I want to say 16, 17 years ago. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Wow. yeah, sharing things like that like don't feel great, but it's real, I think is so important for connection and vulnerability, because to love somebody is to know what their suffering is, because
Yeah.
that's where you can be empathetic, that's where you can connect, that's where you can be with somebody without needing them to be different or change or fixed or whatever. And that is real vulnerability, not trying to fix or be fixed.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to mention to my listeners is to not fight your emotions, because I made that mistake way too many times. I have, and in fact, I will often do this, but what I'll do is I'll get into that dark side of myself. And then I'll actually start cranking out, doing push ups, doing burpees, yelling at the top of my lungs. But I learned way too much that don't fight your emotions, you guys. Even though I promote masculinity, I wholeheartedly believe that when you fight your emotions, it's bad. It's just bad. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that like I'm at a point now where when I see a guy that's so out of touch with his emotions, where he's almost like afraid of them, it is such a huge turnoff to me. Like I don't trust that man at all. I don't want anything to do with him, because if he's afraid of his own emotions, he definitely can't handle mine,
mhm.
And so
Yeah.
like there's no safety in that connection. So it's never going to be like a waste of time for you as a man to invest in feeling whatever it is that you feel. And if you think about it, like we get trained that that's not masculine in our culture, but
Mhm.
we all are infants, we all are toddlers, girls and boys both, and we all speak the same language before we learn English or Spanish or whatever, which is emotion, sensation, breath. That's about it. So it's like that's their most natural form of expression. And we don't need to rationalize it or justify why the toddler's crying when they're hungry. They're just hungry. They're sad. They're crying. You feed them. It's over. So it's like when it can just be treated as a normal part of being a human, it takes the shame out of it and can really be supportive to unlearn all of that conditioning that keeps you kind of locked in yourself.
Yeah, and as I said in my article, correct way to show vulnerability, I basically say most men are emotionally emasculated. And it's true. Look around you. I mean, passive aggressiveness, very real. I've been
Mm-hmm.
going through some uh, emotional detachment stuff with Emily, and it's just, I've been learning the hard way that, you know, here's what I did, Hannah, and I'm going to be full, full transparency, you guys. I've done this with a few other women before, Emily too, but I hardened up my heart. I was like, I don't want you to have access to it. That's kind of what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, again, guys, that you play too hard to get with women, they'll get annoyed, and I'm sure you can attest to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because it's like if I think the woman really does. So the man is like the leader
Yep.
in a lot of ways, but I think when it comes to emotions, the woman is the leader, like in her energy and her body. It's like if she's open, if she's vulnerable, if she's confident, then he can like feel her feminine heart, then he can open his heart. And then that, keeps the doors open for both people. Versus her closing up and being in her masculine, and then it's just like masculine versus masculine energy, which doesn't open anybody's heart. So it's like when she can be soft and open, he can follow and receive that. But when he is in a moment of contraction, there's only so much time, so much patience the woman can have in her openness to be with him, because the pain of not being received, like giving the love, being open, being receptive, and hitting a wall is painful. It hurts to like be giving, to be so available and have it not be received. So you can think about your open-hearted practices even when you don't want to do them. It's like you are giving your woman the gift of giving by her being able to feel your heart.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And I encourage men to be more giving too, because I remember the good parts in the relationship was when I was always leading with my giving hand, like
Mm-hmm.
giving. For example, you guys, I actually after the interview with Hannah on that first time, I actually referred Hannah to Marnie. That's an example of leading that right
Hmm.
there. And I honestly want to congratulate you for basically being a part of the team. And also, I heard that you're going to do a master class, so don't want to say too much about that.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yes, that's coming up soon. I'm really excited.
So, are there any other vulnerable stories that you want to share with my listeners?
Hmm. I So this is funny because I help people with relationships, and I have helped many, many, many clients build an online dating profile before. Like I've helped them curate it, and I myself have never had an online dating profile. I've met lots of past partners online through like social media and things, but I've never actively dated online. And I just recently created a Bumble profile like a week ago. And now I'm in a new city. So like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give this a go. I'm gonna give it a try. I feel open for connection. And that's been feeling vulnerable because I've never done it before, and it's such a like normal thing to do. I feel kind of like an old person with a cell phone, like I don't really know what to do.
Right, right.
So that feels vulnerable for me right now.
Gotcha. Interesting. I met Emily through Coffee Meets Bagel, so try that one.
Yeah, I had a client use that recently.
Yeah. There's plenty of all right, well, first off, you can get banned from Tinder quite easily. So I
Mm,
was gonna say that. But one more thing I will mention is, you know, another vulnerable thing about me is I've been doing NoFap for about 5 years. So,
hmm.
and I think that,
Wow.
yeah, it's definitely not easy, but I've managed to start a blog, over 100 articles now, start a podcast, over 100 podcasts now, and I don't find any desire. Like I just think that sexual discipline is huge for men, and I think that that's
Absolutely.
so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have about 5 minutes left, so if there's anything you want to wrap on with being vulnerable, let me know because I definitely had a blast having this interview with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad we were able to do this again. I mean, something comes to mind with what you just said about the sexual discipline. I think that that is a huge point of vulnerability for men. It's like you got to kind of like cross over the hill to get. So there's a lot of ego around sex, obviously, right? Like things about dick size and how long you last, and like all the porn influence and everything. There's a lot of ego built into male sexual performance. It's like who can do the best job. And so
So stupid.
I think so stupid. And I think that in order to actually do the best job, to build your stamina, to be attuned to a woman's body, to like be connected to your own self completely, your heart and your cock are speaking to each other. Like
Mm-hmm.
all of that um, requires you to drop your ego to even be open to learning. And so that I think is such a point of vulnerability for so many men where it's like, no, I'm good in bed. I don't need to learn that. Like as if they couldn't possibly benefit. And only you and all of your partners benefit when you can drop that ego. So I think that that's a vulnerability I would encourage men to check out.
She read my vulnerability article, you guys, so I'm sure that she saw that part where I say drop your massive superiority complex. So
Hmm. Yeah.
it's really important, you guys. You don't lie to women ever, okay? Because as I said very bluntly, be an honest motherfucker, not an authentic motherfucker, as I
Hmm.
said in my article too. And you guys, I know I kind of like talk about how I flirt with unavailable women, but I will be real with you guys. Uh, I'm the thing that blew my mind, Hannah, is one of these married women. She got almost like so turned on, it was scary. Like I was like, okay. I was like wondering, are you willing to actually go there with me? And I'm like thinking, okay, I don't like that's too far. So
Hmm.
it's like,
Hmm.
no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that to another relationship. But yeah.
Hmm.
I have about 3 minutes left. If there's anything else you want to wrap on, and I would love to release this podcast to my listeners. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about any feedback or anything that comes from that. So what you just said too, it's like the dark desires thing. Having awareness and like, so I think that embracing your darkness is important because that's part of your wholeness. Like if you're only in the light, you're only acknowledging your good parts or the things that are easy or acceptable about you, then you're disintegrated in yourself. There's pieces of you that are being denied. So I think our shadow needs to be embraced, but it needs to be embraced responsibly,
Yep.
because when we play in that shadow world, like what you just said, it opens the door for other people's shadows too. And
Yeah.
that is exactly what you just described. It's like maybe you flirting with someone that you knew was unavailable ignited her stuff in the background where she wants to be, desired by someone that she shouldn't be. And so like
Yeah.
that's on her. And so it's like when you start to go into your shadows and get to know them, do it responsibly and with care, because you
Hmm.
will be um it's like you're playing in a different realm with people. So, you invite that from them as well, and then that's where things can become haywire if you're not doing it consciously.
I'm speaking from experience on that. I actually have an episode called "An Unorthodox Way to Move On from Previous Relationships," as I encourage the listener to become emotionally unavailable for previous partners, because I'm getting the guys to actually like. I know it's dark, but I want to wrap this podcast up by saying this, guys. I do encourage a little bit of emotional unavailability for previous relationships. There's a clear reason. It's because it's it's because if you think of her in that emotional way, you actually give them the power. Okay, if you think about it. So I'm just encouraging guys to move forward. But yeah,
Hmm.
about 1 minute left of my time here. So actually, I'm going to wrap this podcast up. It was awesome having you on, Hannah. And guys, I really want to encourage all of you to listen to Fuck Yourself Happy. That is an awesome podcast. Hannah does post on there frequently, so just check it out. I appreciate you coming out to the Masculine Mindset Show, Hannah.
Thank you so much.